Okay, guys, our second chapter that you'll have notes on for the week. So it's just society. So we're talking about one subject theme here. So here's our terms. Oh my gosh, it's 5 terms. You guys have 25 terms on this quiz. Y'all should do so well. You should kill it. I believe in you. Okay, so the primary thing that they focus on are urban areas in the industrial age because when we're talking about industrialization, like the process of not automating, yeah, in a way, automating or making production more efficient. The urbanization ultimately is the most impactful social change. Okay, so cities grow a lot as a consequence of industrialization. To this day, more people live in urban areas that have proportionally than they ever did before. Okay, so these cities are pretty densely populated. Like these are places that historically, right? If you live in I guess a good way to make this feel tangible to you guys would be that when you lived in a rural area, which is what most people lived in before the Industrial Revolution, you would probably know 100 people your entire life, right? Think about, even in your short lives, the 15 to 16 years you've been on this earth, how many people not only have you seen, but you've interacted with and learned the names of, right? That's what we're talking about. That is the consequence of industrialization, right? Now, in a lot of these urban areas, during industrializing society, they're unhealthy places. They're very dense. People who are densely populated are spreading the germs around. People do not have the resistances to necessarily deal with that, so people get quite sick. And because of how densely populated these are and how many people are living in cities now, the governmental infrastructures don't develop immediately methods to govern and control these populations, right? So like police forces didn't exist as we know them yet. And so like states had to figure out, how do we police a population to make sure that crimes are, when committed, are addressed and criminals captured. That happens after cities grow. That doesn't happen before cities grow. That happens often as a reaction to the crimes that are caused in cities, right? Most workers who are employed by these factories live in squalid tenements, these quickly built buildings that are not safe, that are shoddily produced. A lot of these tenements are collected in these areas that were regarded as slums. So these places are undergoverned. The people who built these buildings are not really thinking about building buildings to last, but building buildings to hold as many people as possible to maximize the amount of rent you can charge, revenue you can generate from rent. Disease spelled rapidly. We talked about that, right? Because people are just like pooping. They're pooping a lot because that's what people do. People do that like anywhere from like 1 to 6 times a day. I don't know. And so that there are not sewage systems yet, guys. They need to make those after the cities are built. So the sewage systems come after the cities grow, or parallel, but not fast enough. So human waste pollute water supplies that poison people, that get them sick. Middle class people have it quite a bit better than people in the slums, but it's still not quite great. So the social hierarchy changes a great deal as well, right? So a working class, the people on the bottom of any social hierarchy often have been the workers, right? The people who do like physical labor, but now the kind of labor they're changing, and that's going to be talked about in the next chapter. Now, labor had become divided. It had become more simplified. It had become more specialized, right? So that means that people had become replaceable, which means that workers had less means to advocate for better treatment, right? A good old peasant revolt against your feudal lord isn't going to cut it anymore. That's not how we do things anymore. You can't just go to your lord's manor and burn down his house. Like, that doesn't work anymore. There's too many things in the way of doing that. Now, also new jobs, not mangers, managers are required to coordinate the actions of people. That's a whole new job, right? Businesses require people to figure out how much stuff we're making, how much revenue we're making. Like they need accountants now, and they need a lot of accountants, right, to keep track of all the money coming in. how much they're producing, who they're selling to, right? Because economies are growing larger. You got to spend money to keep track of what you're buying and selling to maximize your profits, figuring out where you need to buy things, where you need to sell things, right? You got to have managers figuring out how to use your workers more productively and develop systems of production. And on the tippy top, you have people who own businesses, who have the capital to invest in building factories, to then create these spaces where things can be produced and hire workers to make those things. Farm work and factory work are physical labor. They're you can't work from home anymore because you just don't have a spinning Jenny in your living room, especially if you're living in a tenement where you live in 300 square feet in a family of 5. Bad time. Work is now more strictly structured, right? If you were a farmer, you were a part of the planting, you were a part of the harvest, you were a part of the storage. Your job evolved throughout the growing season. If you're a factory worker and you build chairs, you are doing the one part of chair construction you've been trained to do at any time of the year, right? There's no variance. You're not making a different kind of chair. Often maybe you would, but usually not. You are just making the chair, right? And the part of the chair you're making, right? So workers have a lot less independence, less autonomy, right? Like a farmer can decide I'll focus on this plot today. I'll do this plot the next day. No, you're getting in your spot and you're building that chair leg. That's all you're doing the entire year. That's all you got. Children, because of the wages, because workers had less leverage, they were paid a lot less, which means they had to maximize what their families could produce in terms of income, which means that children had to be used to produce for the family. Children, this is about as sanitary as it can be put, as children had unique advantages in industrial spaces. They were smaller, so they could fit into those hard to reach spaces that adult hands could not fit into. And it's just as dangerous for them as it was for an adult to work in a factory, except they're children, right? So when there's an accident and a person loses their hand, a child loses their hand, which is worse because that person, just patently worse, because a child losing their hand is going to have more time on this earth having lost a hand, right? So that means they're going to be handless for a longer time. You know what I'm saying? It's 5:40 right now. I'm staying here for the basketball game. So that's why I'm getting a little loopy. I'm sorry, guys. I should be more serious. I'm sorry. Women. So women are participating in the labor force already, but now they're doing different kinds of labor. They're paid less because of sexism. But also, what's interesting is that in the middle classes, women actually become more restricted in their labor. They do a lot less. They do a lot less monetarily compensated labor. In fact, they're doing a lot of home labor and home maintenance. It is hard work to do and important work to do, but they are maintaining the home, right, for the family unit. And then we call that the domestic sphere. And this is a time when the home became more feminized, right? Think about aristocratic life. Women and men lived in these spaces, and then servants took care of that of the space, right? In this world, it becomes more defined that the workspace outside the home is a masculine space and inside the home is a feminine space, right? And so though that is a change in the psychology and in the culture of how people see what the home means. That's a new thing. It's not natural, right? That's not organic to the human experience of seeing the home as a feminine space. And now the other consequence of that is because women are in the home and they are maintaining the home, they do have some free time. And in that free time, they kind of wonder, why do I have to do these things that men tell me? Why do I have to do what men tell me to do? Just in general. Why? In terms of the environment, I would call the effect below average to bad. So because steam power relied on fossil fuels to be more productive, that CO2, that coal released carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Bare minimum, you're releasing coal particles into the air. People are inhaling that coal. You have sediment in their lungs. That's a bad time. You have coal entering water systems like aquifers or rivers. The byproduct of industrial processes also going into water sources and polluting them and poisoning those water sources. And then you have the whole global warming thing where, because of the properties of carbon dioxide, heat is allowed into the atmosphere, into the planet through the sun. But then when it enters the sun, it bounces off the CO2 in the air. That's disproportionately released by carbon dioxide, but also methane. Cow belches also have a role in this too. So that's a thing to also consider. I don't have a gist here. I would say that actually number 2 is a great gist, guys. So I'm just going to move that there. Mass production, one of the most important transformations of the Industrial Revolution is that things became more accessible to people, right? Like there are objects that without mass production and the economy of scale, we would not have access to even to this day, right? So we can have access to more stuff than ever before. Urban areas grew more than ever, right? There's more human interaction, right? People with different perspectives and different ways of life interact with each other more. They see the world differently. They get exposed to new perspectives. In general, during early industrial era, poverty was at a higher degree. Crime was at a higher degree. The environment changed a lot. I know I just talked about how negative it could be. And in so many ways, it's negative in that we talk about how destructive industrialization can be for the environment. But also, we have to consider that, first of all, the planet's going to be here after we go. Like, if humans ever go away, Earth's still going to be here, right? Like, it's our worst to planet Earth, and there's very little we could do to destroy it, right? And it'd be very hard for us to even destroy life. Like, we could, I think we have the means to do so, but like, Earth will keep on going on, right? And so, in a lot of ways, how I've come to think about humanity has been thinking of humanity as a force of nature, like a volcano or or a hurricane. Like, we have a massive effect on how the world behaves. Think of just in terms of biodiversity, right? A lot of plants and animals have become more extinct, but there are certain animals, as a consequence of humanity's involvement in the world, are having a great time. Cockroaches, rats, cows, right? They couldn't be as genetically successful as they are without human intervention, right? Global inequality explodes, right? That like there are far less people who have, and the people who have a lot. And there are a lot more people within industrial societies and without industrial societies that have not, right? That don't have as much. And then the Great Divergence, which is the phenomena of Europe becoming the most powerful and paramount power in the world, happens as a consequence of industrialization. And we can't ignore that either. So that is our final chapter on notes. I'll do another video that kind of brings all the entire Unit 5 together. And I will see you guys in that video or next week.